all, this is Kasakma, Kevaruva Project Illuminated, and please excuse my voice, but I've had a cold the last couple of days and been feeling out of it. So, as many of you are aware of, I was in the hospital for a short bit, but I'm all better now. But today I wanted to make a video to talk specifically about, while I'm shopping in a supermarket, about how Hollywood really works for black filmmakers so that we can get an understanding of the complexities of what it takes to get the doors open for opportunities for African Americans. And the parameters are different when it comes to African Americans, when it comes to gays, when it comes to Latinos, when it comes to whites. There are different prerequisites which will afford you opportunities within the industry depending upon what demographics you fall into. And unfortunately, that's the truth of the matter is we like to think that things are based on talent and things are on an equal and level playing field, but that simply is just not the truth. That is a myth that is bestowed upon you by the major universities. To get you to enroll in their programs, of course, they have to put forth the hypothesis or the idea that it's all about talent, which will gain you access to resources and individuals within Hollywood, or they will go as far as to admit that it is based on somewhat to a limited degree nepotism or who you know. But the reality is nepotism and who you know, such as having a godfather in the industry to get you into the door, that plays a small role in it. What is of paramount importance that you need to understand is more about the complexities of race, the color dynamics, and where you are on the hierarchy of the color race totem pole. Because everyone is vying for the top position on that totem pole, and some people are using you, whether you be African American, Latino, Asian, or what have you, to position themselves at a higher position on that totem pole. But specifically, I'm going to talk in terms of African Americans because that is what is we see one of the predominant racial groups in Hollywood that are now making their way independently into mainstream Hollywood. No, you'll see with films that have just been recently released, like Selma, 12 Years a Slave, and many more films like that, The Butler, and now most recently the TV show, which I understand is a hit, Empire. What you have to understand about these things is that these are films and filmmakers who are sanctioned by the white oligarchy in Hollywood. These films meet a certain requirement for the agenda they want to put forth to the world. The agenda has to be basically proselytized on a global level, not just on a national level, because at the end of the day, Hollywood is, yes, it's a business, but it's more so about putting forth propaganda to paint a view of the world, and one that is more in line with white supremacy than it is with liberalism, which Hollywood tries to pretend that they're very liberal, but that is exactly the opposite. They're more conservative than liberal. So what Hollywood does is that instead of selecting talent based on the artistic merits of the project, what they tend to do is select filmmakers who they will craft into these brilliant auteurs and put them out there in mainstream and give them awards and accolades. But it's all about the prerequisites, meaning that their ideology, their projects have to align with what Hollywood wants to communicate to the world. And most often, and let me give you examples of this so it's very clear to you, most often when you look at it, you can actually categorize it and you can see the patterns from film to film to film. Now, speaking of only African American films, although for white filmmakers you will see the same thing, and for Asian filmmakers you will see the same type of prerequisite, not the exact same prerequisite, but you will be able to catalog prerequisites. So for African Americans, if you see that the films and the filmmakers that they tend to select are ones that promote the gay and lesbian agenda, ones that promotes interracial relationships only as far as the having a black woman marry or have coitus with a white man. If it's the reverse, a black man getting together with a white woman, that's taboo, and they don't want to put that forth. As hence, if you remember Will Smith's video Hancock, or film Hancock, it was very important for them to put forth the idea that he couldn't be with Charlize Theron because she was white. So in essence, she was like kryptonite to him, and that was really overtly so racist, I felt. Here you have this superhero with all these powers, and his wife is Charlize, and yet he can't be with her because every time he gets near her, he becomes weak. So there was a clear message there that Hollywood was trying to tell you. But going back to the criteria and the prerequisites, you'll notice that these films have the same agenda. Again, going back to what I was saying before, promoting the gay lesbian agenda, you'll see black gay males. And typically what you'll also see is the emasculating the black male character, where he'll wear a dress, he'll be very feminine. He won't be necessarily the hero of the film. But the important thing is to note that he has to be emasculated in some way, shape, or form. Moving further on, we can see more evidence of this in terms of how the black woman is portrayed as loudmouth, second fiddle, things of that nature. And these are prevalent through all these films. One just has to look at them and then take note that these are the specific requirements for propelling a filmmaker to stardom. If the film contains these type of idioms. One of the things that too, which was very interesting, a film came out recently called Dear White People, and which got a lot of praise in Sundance, and we had a limited release both here in the West Coast. And what was disappointing was it did contain the same old things. We had one black young male who got involved into a gay relationship. We had these young black woman who's supposed to be pro-black got involved with a white man. And we see all the scenarios being played out there, each one of the scenarios. And typically also you'll notice that the characters in the film are, their occupation usually centers around either basketball, entertainment, music, but it's never around anything that is substantial, science, technology, engineering, math. You'll never see that. That's kind of like, because you have to understand that they're putting out propaganda that's designed to influence the world on a global level, to not only paint a picture of African Americans, but to promote an avenue of opportunity for them, saying that here are areas that you can get into and be very successful in. Don't think about being a lawyer. Don't think about being an engineer. Think more about being a basketball player. Think more about being the head of a record label. Think more about getting involved in an interracial relationship with a white man. These are the things they're putting forth, and it's typical that you'll see with every filmmaker that they are sponsoring. It's the white overseers they are sponsoring. And while we're talking about overseers, that's another one of the prerequisites that are in the films. You'll notice that so-called black films always have the white protagonist who comes to the rescue or who's there advocating for the black character. That is something that's very paramount and very overt. You'll notice that even in Selma, we had the president who was Lyndon, who was working with Dr. King to help African Americans to gain civil rights, and you'll notice that a lot of screen time was given to him. So we're not given the opportunities of telling our own stories independently of the white power structure, but more so about that they have to be present and always overseeing the story thread, and if they're not present, Hollywood then wants to make the argument that the film will not sell, especially overseas, because there are no proxies, meaning there's no characters for the white mass to identify with in the film. Therefore, they won't come and support the film, which is a fallacy, because most African Americans support white films, given the fact that most of these white films are absent of any diversity, And you can look at Exodus, I think it's Gods and Kings, as an example of where all the characters that were of African American descent were marginalized, but still it was a big support for that film, especially in the Christian community, the black Christian community. So the argument that Hollywood makes is that there's no proxy or white character for white masses to identify with it won't sell or it won't do well in the box office is totally erroneous. But then again, it all makes sense when you want to look at the fact that they're trying to promote their agenda, which is again white supremacy, to the world on a global level. And so the sad part about it is that many young filmmakers of color who go through film school are really starry-eyed. They're very ambitious, they're goal-oriented, and they have this dream about being a great filmmaker, only to have that dream smashed because the realization hits them that it's really not about talent. It's more about, you know, your values, your principles. Are they in alignment with white supremacy? If they are, then your chances of gaining entry into the system are that much more open to you. And even I remember when I was studying in film school, Matty Rich, and people probably don't remember this, came out with a film called Straight Outta Brooklyn. And I had a film where I was showcasing an affluent young black woman, but the industry didn't want to talk about that. That narrative wasn't something they wanted to put forth because they wanted to keep the idea of which was basically sponsored by liberals, the idea that blacks are impoverished, blacks are on welfare, blacks are poor. Whoa, let's feel sorry for these black people. Let's put out their story because it's being real, it's telling the truth. Meanwhile, the other end of the spectrum, they're not interested in promoting, which is showing how you have educated black men and women who are making a way for themselves in life. That is something that the white elite does not want to put out there because film is a very powerful, influential medium where it can inspire young people to grow beyond their means. And to do that, you don't want that happening if you're a white supremacist, especially when you look at films like all of the superhero films that are coming out from Marvel and DC. You'll see that there's an absence of African American superheroes, because when you have a Superman or a Batman, that is very inspirational for young children to grow up and want to be a superhero. And if you have that absence within our communities, then you won't have children with a vision of what they want to be and what they could become. So that's really all I want to say on the subject matter, because my voice is starting to go out. But I want you to think about the criteria and how unfortunate it is that you start out as a filmmaker going through film school only to have reality hit you in the face and realize that it was never about talent, but it was about your principles that would get you through the system and into the door if you were willing, and I don't want to use the term sellout, but if you're willing to play ball and go along with white supremacy, you'll have a career. If not, you're going to be marginalized and relegated to the indie circuit for a very long time. So this is Kasakma Keperu for Project Illuminated, and that's all for now.